The morning mist was unusually thick. The gates of the military base stood firm, almost symbolic, as if guarding not just the nation, but the emotions that had been buried within its grounds. But on this particular day, something shifted. The air felt heavier. The silence was no longer empty. It was pregnant with anticipation, emotion, and an unspoken truth. Why were guards unusually tight-lipped? Why were cameras briefly banned? And why did everyone seem more somber than usual? The moment BTS's Jungkook was seen walking toward the base's farewell hall, the entire mood of the facility changed. Soldiers straightened their posture, not out of regulation, but out of respect. No one had expected this, a quiet, unofficial farewell happening behind closed military doors, witnessed by a handful of people, most of whom still cannot speak openly about what they heard that day. What did Jungkook say in his last private address to fellow soldiers? Why did a wave of tears sweep through a room known for training men to be resilient, unshakable, and composed? The truth is, this wasn't supposed to be public. There were no official announcements, no press releases, no SNS post from Big Hit Music, just whispers. Whispers of a goodbye so raw, so personal, that even those trained in the art of silence struggled to hold back their tears. It all began with a handwritten note Jungkook carried. Folded meticulously into four, the paper had slightly worn edges. He held it tightly, but gently, as though it carried more than just ink, as though it held years of burden, gratitude, fear, and healing. And one knew he was going to speak that day. Jungkook had completed his service with grace and commitment, fulfilling every duty without complaint or spotlight. But on this final day, with less than 24 hours left before discharge, he stood up, not as an idol, not as a celebrity, but as a brother among soldiers. "Can I say a few words?" he asked, voice low but steady. Permission was granted instantly. What followed was a moment no one had prepared for. Jungkook began with silence. He looked around the hall, a place where they once gathered in drills, trainings, and briefings, and for a long second, said nothing. He looked everyone in the eye. It was his way of saying, "I see you. I remember you." Then his voice cracked. "I came here with fear in my heart, not because I was afraid of pain, but because I was afraid I'd lose myself." He began. That one sentence broke the tension. Whispers turned to stunned silence. Everyone leaned in. This was not the Jungkook the world knew. This was not the polished performer with perfect pitch and stage presence. This was John Jungkook, the man, raw, human, and stripped of every label except one. "Soldier," he continued, "I thought being here meant disappearing. I thought I'd be forgotten. I thought I would forget who I was." His fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded the note. But I was wrong. Being here reminded me of something I had long forgotten. Why I started. Why I sang. Why I stood in front of all of you with a mic, with a message. And then, the unexpected, Jungkook didn't quote lyrics. He didn't recite rehearsed lines. Instead, he talked about a soldier he shared a room with during basic training. A young man who had lost his parents and came into the service broken, defeated, and silent. He never spoke much, Jungkook said. But one night, I sang a song quietly just to myself. I didn't even know he was awake. The next day, he looked at me and said, "For the first time, I slept without nightmares." The room froze, and no one had known this. It had never been shared. There was no fanfare. No cameras. Just a quiet moment where music healed, silently. That's when I realized, Jungkook whispered, "Even in here, my voice mattered." His voice cracked again, but he kept speaking. "You all taught me something I didn't know I needed. You showed me brotherhood. You showed me strength that has nothing to do with muscles. And you showed me that being human doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole." Soldiers began lowering their heads. One of them wiped away tears, trying to remain composed, but emotion had already won. Jungkook then looked down at his note and said, "This is not a goodbye. It's a promise. I'll carry you with me. Every beat, every lyric, every performance will have this moment tucked inside it. And then he said the line that reportedly broke everyone in the room. When the world sees me again, they'll hear you too. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a vow. A declaration that his time in the military wasn't a pause, but a transformation. As he ended his speech, he gave a military salute.
No dramatic gesture. No idle smile.
Just a firm, respectful salute. The kind that said, I came in as Jungkook. I leave as something more. Security personnel reportedly escorted him quietly after that. No fan greeting. No press conference. Just the soft sound of boots walking away from a chapter that forever changed him. But why was this speech kept secret for so long? Why was it never released to the public? Because Jungkook didn't say it for the world. He said it for the few who stood beside him when the cameras were off. The fans were far, and the stage was made of concrete, not lights. But now it's beginning to surface. Someone couldn't keep it inside any longer. One by one, testimonies have begun to leak. Words passed along between soldiers, then to friends, and now, quietly, they've reached us. And the question remains, just as the sun began to rise behind the steel fences of the military base, the scene outside remained still. But inside, something completely unexpected was unfolding, something that even high-ranking officers couldn't anticipate. Why did Jungkook suddenly walk in the opposite direction after giving his farewell speech? Why did he turn around when everything was already over? And most importantly, what did he do next that left senior commanders and guards stunned? This wasn't part of the official schedule. The soldiers knew that once the farewell was over, Jungkook would be quietly escorted out the back gate for privacy. That was the plan. That was the rule. That was how every other celebrity had exited. Quietly, without emotion, without disruption. But Jungkook didn't follow that script. Instead, right after delivering one of the most intimate and emotional speeches ever heard within those walls, Jungkook paused. He had reached the exit corridor when he stopped in his tracks. No, he said quietly, according to one eyewitness, and no one knew what he meant at first. A young officer accompanying him reportedly asked, "Is everything all right?" Jungkook didn't answer. He simply turned around, walking swiftly. Not to his room, not to his locker, but straight back to the main gates of the facility. IT was there, at the guarded boundary between the military and the outside world, where a small group of soldiers were stationed, soldiers who hadn't been able to attend the farewell event due to duty. They were on post, performing their final guard rotations, unaware of the moment Jungkook had just shared inside. But Jungkook hadn't forgotten them. He walked right up to the line of guards. They stiffened, unsure of what was happening. Military decorum demands hierarchy, silence, and strict adherence to orders.
No emotional displays. No informal gestures.
Just protocol, and then Jungkook did the unthinkable. He stood in front of them, took off his military cap, bowed deeply, a full 90-degree bow, and said, loud enough for them all to hear, "Thank you for standing while I spoke. I didn't forget you." One of the guards, a younger soldier reportedly in his early 20s, couldn't stop the tear that slipped down his cheek. Jungkook noticed, and what he did next would have gotten any other soldier reprimanded. He reached out, pulled the young man into a hug, not a brief, formal pat. A real hug, a human embrace, one that said, "You matter." Officers watching the CCTV reportedly scrambled to respond. Emotions like this were not allowed to override procedure. But no one moved. No one dared interrupt. Even the commanding officer present remained frozen. Because in that moment, protocol didn't matter. Humanity did. Jungkook then turned to each of the 5 guards, shook their hands one by one, and said their names out loud, something that stunned them. How did he know our names? One soldier would later whisper in a leaked message board post. It turns out, Jungkook had memorized them beforehand. He had quietly asked for the names of the soldiers who were assigned to guard duty during his farewell, because he didn't want them to feel invisible. It wasn't grand. It wasn't a performance. There were no cameras, no rehearsed words. Just Jungkook, one of the biggest stars in the world, choosing to see people most would have overlooked. And this small act? It broke the internet. Quietly. Why quietly? Because none of it was live-streamed. None of it was captured by paparazzi. The only reason we know this happened is because someone couldn't keep it secret anymore. A fellow soldier, anonymously, posted a cryptic message late that night. He came back to the gate. We didn't expect it. He bowed. He cried. We did too. The post exploded on private fan boards, but was quickly removed. Still, screenshots circulated and confirmation followed. Multiple insiders began to share similar accounts. Private messages, DMs, all leading to one truth. Jungkook broke protocol. But he honored hearts. This was never supposed to be public. But how could something that beautiful stay hidden? Commanders didn't reprimand him. How could they? Because in that moment, even the hardest trained men in uniform felt something shift. He reminded us, one officer later said, that we're human first, soldiers second. As Jungkook finally walked back toward the exit after that unexpected return, a guard raised his hand to salute, and Jungkook saluted back, eyes glassy, lips slightly quivering. He exited not with the silence of routine, but with the sound of a memory no one would forget. And yet, there's more. What happened the night before his farewell event may explain why Jungkook felt compelled to break the rules. Why he chose connection over tradition, heart over habit. Because there was one conversation, one final message, one last unexpected visit the night before. It was already past curfew. The base was quiet. Lights were dimmed, boots tucked away, and most soldiers were asleep, resting before the next day's final ceremony. But in one isolated hallway, the light in a private office remained on, and inside that room, two men sat facing each other. One of them was Jungkook. The other was his commanding officer. And no one was supposed to know about this meeting. It wasn't in any schedule. It wasn't even confirmed by the military, at least not officially. And yet, the whispers surrounding this unexpected late-night conversation have only grown louder. Why did Jungkook meet privately with his superior the night before discharge? And what did that officer tell him? That brought him to tears. Eyewitness accounts from a lower-ranking staff member revealed that Jungkook was quietly summoned at 11:43 p.m.
No escort.
No written orders. Just a verbal request delivered softly. Captain would like to speak with you. Just for a moment. It wasn't disciplinary. It wasn't about duties. It was something else, according to a now-deleted anonymous forum post by a soldier who claimed to be stationed nearby that night. Jungkook entered the room with hesitation, unsure of what to expect. But what unfolded behind that door would reportedly shape his entire farewell the next day. The officer, a man known for his firmness and discipline, wasn't sitting behind his desk. He was standing, looking out the window, and without turning around, he said, "You know, I had no idea who you were when you first arrived." Jungkook, surprised, said nothing. I didn't grow up with pop music. Didn't follow BTS. When they told me a celebrity would be assigned to my command, I expected less. I thought you'd be arrogant. Soft. Maybe even fake. Jungkook stood quietly, absorbing every word. But I was wrong, the officer continued. You showed up early. You trained harder than most. You never once asked for special treatment. And more than anything, you listened. The commanding officer finally turned to face him. You listened when others just wanted to be heard. You supported those who were struggling. You shared food with the quiet ones. You sang for the ones who couldn't sleep. And then came the moment that reportedly shattered Jungkook's composure. The officer pulled a folded piece of paper from his drawer and handed it to Jungkook. This is from my daughter, he said. She's 14. She was bullied last year. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Said the world was too heavy. Jungkook slowly opened the paper. It was a letter to simple note, written in youthful handwriting. But the words were impossible to ignore. Dear Jungkook, I don't know what you're doing in the army, but I want to say thank you. I listened to Still With You, when I feel like I'm drowning. And it helps.
You helped me, even when you didn't know me.
Thank you for being my light. Jungkook didn't say anything for a while. He just stared at the letter, then quietly said, I never thought I'd be someone's strength. To which the officer replied, You are. Whether you like it or not, you are. And that was the moment everything changed. The farewell speech Jungkook had originally prepared was simple, formal,
Polite.
but after that conversation, he tore it up. He didn't want to be polite anymore. He wanted to be real. He wanted to speak, not from the image of an idol, but from the identity of a man who realized, maybe for the first time, just how far his voice truly reached. That conversation wasn't a ceremony. It wasn't televised. But it was the reason Jungkook rewrote everything. It was the reason he bowed to guards, hugged soldiers, read his speech with a cracking voice. It was the reason he didn't care about protocol anymore, because suddenly it was bigger than him. IT wasn't about discharge anymore. It was about legacy, humanity, memory. The officer closed their meeting with one final line. You're not leaving the army tomorrow, Jungkook. You're taking it with you. That sentence, according to insiders, never left him. He returned to his dorm that night and didn't sleep. Instead, he rewrote his speech by hand, choosing honesty over perfection, choosing story over ceremony, choosing the truth. And the truth was this. Jungkook had changed, not just physically, not just mentally, but emotionally, deeply, in a way that only service, sacrifice, and solitude can do. That's what the cameras miss. That's what the headlines didn't show. But now we know. The night before his farewell, Jungkook sat face to face with a man who had once doubted him and earned not just his respect, but his gratitude.